Hi, hello, welcome to ADHD Foundation's Neurodiversity Developing, beg your pardon, welcome to ADHD Foundation's Developing Independence presentation in partnership with Witherslack Group. My name's Lisa Rudge and I'll be taking you through the slides. So when we talk about independence, what do we mean? So independence is our ability to make our own choices and to carry out things independently, on our own back, if you like. Independence begins at birth, so right from very, very young, we're learning to do things for ourselves, aren't we? But independence continues right throughout our lives. We need to become independent for healthy development. It brings ourselves a sense of importance, a sense of belonging, and it's essential for us to build relationships and for us to contribute. Excuse me. Independence builds our self-awareness and also our sensitivity to other people. Now, the age at which we become independent depends on things. It depends on our personalities, on our environment, on our family, on our society. There's no hard and fast rules about when a person becomes independent. In our session today, we're going to be looking at, I suppose, different types of independence. So what we look at as independence for children, how we can encourage our children to become independent. We're going to look at how we encourage our young people to become independent. We're also going to have a look at what might cause any delay in our independence as we go along there as well. For our children with neurodevelopmental conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and you name all the other ND conditions, often for our children there may be challenges to our independence, things that we have to try a little bit harder for, or maybe adjust or moderate our independence. So have a look at children first. So one tip to help our children to become independent is to offer choice. Choice is a fabulous way to encourage independence in our children. Choice helps us to develop critical thinking. When children make their own choices, they open up a wide range of opportunities for them. They open up a wide range of possibilities on how they can experience cause and consequence. So what can we do to offer choice to our children? Well, we can be giving them, choices of what they're going to wear today. That's a really, really simple choice. But, within safe parameters, what do you want to wear? What do you want to have at snack time? Which film shall we watch at the weekend? Now, so for some of our children, choice can be quite overwhelming. So if our child does feel that choice overwhelms them, well, let's limit it down, still give them the choice. Would you like to wear this t-shirt or this shirt today? Would you like an apple or a tangerine in your lunchbox? We can still give choice, but we can limit it to a more manageable level for our children and young people. By giving choice, like I said, our children begin to understand consequence. If they choose to wear a pair of shorts on a day like, today, where it's quite cold and miserable and wet outside, they may get cold. If they choose to eat a whole packet of crisps before their dinner, well, actually, they're not going to eat their dinner. So it's working out that the cause and consequence. Excuse me. Moving forward, pick our battles. So I've just been saying about choice, haven't I? And our children may choose some things that make us think, oh my goodness, no. They may choose to wear that unicorn hat with their combat bottoms and their wellies, and we might think, oh my goodness, you look an absolute state. Does it matter? So we need to learn how to pick our battles. And of course, we get the final say if things are unsafe, if there's a risk to health or safety or well-being. But by encouraging our child to make those small decisions themselves, builds up their self-confidence, their self-esteem, and their ability to make good choices. Like I said, they'll learn from those consequences. So if they want to put a pair of wellies on a sunny day, does it matter? Is it worth us trying to argue, or do we just let them make that choice and find out the consequences? Does it matter if they need to walk the dog? Does it matter if they do it before their breakfast or after their breakfast? Giving our children that choice builds that freedom, builds that critical thinking. So although we mightn't always agree with their choices, pick our battles, leave our judgments perhaps for when there's a matter of safety, a matter of well-being. Providing some degree of flexibility and within structure is really important. Structure is fabulous for our children and young people, especially our neurodivergent children and young people. Our kids often thrive with the safety that structure and routine brings. But structure and routine doesn't take away independence. Structure and routine actually encourage independence and autonomy. The predictability of a structure and the predictability and the consistency helps our children and young people feel safe. They know what to expect. They know what needs to be done. And they can get on and do those things without us as mum or dad or other family member who saying, oh, you need to go and brush your teeth. You need to go and do whatever task. However, when we're thinking about that routine and structure, we've got to allow a degree of flexibility. If it's too rigid, our children, young people may well have a tough time because there is no room to grow. There is no room for manoeuvre. So we may well get kickback from that, emotional responses to that. And our children and young people with ND are likely to have big emotions to lots of things. So if we have that structure that allows that predictability, we're building that safety. But if we have a degree of flexibility there, we're giving our children that sense of autonomy, that they can actively engage with their routine. They can actively engage in their structure. They can make it better. They can build upon it. Think about how our environment is set up. What do we expect from our children? Is it practical? Is it achievable? So think about perhaps our home. How is our home organised? Is it organised in a way that helps our child's independence? If we're expecting our child to come in from school and hang their coat up, where do they hang their coat up? Is it somewhere that it's eye level? Can they reach it? Can they reach the cups to get themselves a glass of water or a glass of milk or a glass of juice? Can they reach the plates to be able to get their own snack? So, having lots of opportunity to look at our environment, is it set up to help our children and young people develop that independence? Think about what we expect our children to do as well. We expect our children perhaps to get ready of a morning. Come on, get dressed of a morning, put your clothes on. If our child, for example, is dyspraxic and has challenge with fine motor skills, we might be tempted to say, come here, I'll do your buttons for you. We might think we're helping, but how is that, improving their independence, their autonomy? What we might do is offer them choice. Do they want a Velcro fastening on their top button instead of that top button? That way they can do them themselves. Do we change their shoes from laces to Velcro so they can do them themselves? So think about the things we want our children to be able to manage. Think about in our home. We can set small tasks for our children and young people to be doing to encourage their independence. As an example, I don't know, what about the laundry? Okay, we need to do the laundry. How can our children and young people get involved in that? We might ask them to put all their dirty washing in the wash basket. We might ask them to help us carry the wash basket downstairs, sort the colours in the laundry, load the machine, fill the detergent dispenser, and push the button, make the washing machine go. All of these things, small steps, help build our independence. And those small steps help us think about the steps that are needed to complete a task. So building in these things help our children promote that independence. We might have different checklists and tick lists to help with the motivation of doing these tasks. When we're asking our children to be involved with chores, we might have, a tick list. Okay, I've tidied my room, I've put the toys away, and I've helped with the laundry. That sense of achievement is more likely to encourage our children and young people to want to do more, to look for more ways in which they can become more independent. Our next slide, give them space. How can our children become independent if we don't give them the room to grow, the room to try new things? So they've actually got to be independent to build independence. So the more opportunities we can give our children, the better. So those opportunities, obviously within our safe boundaries, but we might have times where our children are, expected to do things on their own without being supervised. That can be a scary concept for us as parents and carers, can't it? Because often our go-to is to micromanage and make sure everything's safe. But if we are sure that the environment is safe, let our children have that little bit extra freedom. Give them opportunities without being supervised. Give our children opportunity to be bored as well, build independence. And I know some of you might be thinking, oh, Lisa, my children are bored, they're going to come and nag me and say, I've got nothing to do, what can I do? When our children are allowed to be bored, that's when imagination comes into play. And imagination is an aspect that's essential for building independence, to be able to plan, to be able to move forward. So allow boredom, allow curiosity. Excuse me. Some of our children and young people who may have the likes of ADHD may be quite impulsive. To a certain degree, allow that impulsivity if we know that it's within safe boundaries. Allow that creativity that comes with that. For our children and young people with difference of attention, sometimes when our attention is pulled in different directions, that allows us the space to be more independent. Again, as adults and as parents, we often want to protect, don't we? There's a fine line between, protecting and thriving, and that overprotecting and stopping our children from becoming independent. So, like we've got on the screen there, for our children to become independent, we've got to let them. We've got to give them that opportunity. And that comes on to risk, doesn't it? So on the previous screen, I'd said, as long as we know the environment's safe, we'll let our children have that little bit of freedom. Risk's a bit of a scary word, isn't it? When we think of risk, we think of all sorts of big events. But risk-taking is an essential part of becoming independent. Trying new things is a risk, isn't it? So encouraging healthy risk is important for our children and young people. Again, it's easy for us to overprotect. But when we overprotect, it's sending out that message, isn't it, to say, I don't think you can cope. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can manage. So allowing our child to push their boundaries, to be able to take those risks. What would happen if? So we can start, this healthy risk taking by using our open communication, can't we? Our child might want to go out on their bike. So we'll say, well, okay, perhaps to go out on your bike, what do you need? Helmet, arm pads, knee pads. Where is a safe place to go on your bike? So we have that conversation. The path in the park. We don't go by the road. So that open communication helps us build up our child's, I suppose, ability to measure risk. Like I said, risk is an important part of us moving forward, isn't it? We risk assess all the time, don't we? I came out this morning, looked at the weather. Do I need an umbrella today? That's risk assessment, isn't it? Running down a road, if the pavement's all up and down, we make that decision. Do we run down that road? Do we take another path? Risk assessment, we do it all the time. Help encourage our children to know how to assess risk. Avoiding overcorrection and embracing mistakes. Now, some of you might think, oh my goodness, as you're reading that. For some of us, when things go wrong, we want to be there straight away to comfort our child, to make sure they know it's okay, to fix things for them. Again, there's that fine line. Because if we are constantly correcting our child when they're trying to be independent, they're not going to learn how to navigate these types of situations. So it's important for us to, I suppose, hold in our urge to fix things. So we need to let our children make mistakes so that they can learn from those mistakes. So, if something goes wrong, our child might be upset. We can talk with them. What happened? Why did it happen? What could we do better next time? Building up that critical thinking. For our children and young people with ND, often we see these big emotions when things don't go to plan or don't go right. However, when we rationalize, when we talk things through, okay, so we've dropped our cup there. What can we do? We can clean it up. The cup hasn't broken, hasn't damaged anything. We can clean it up and we can have another drink. It's developing that critical thinking. And when our children are comfortable in making mistakes and learning from their mistakes, they're going to be more likely to want to try new things. Think about that overcorrection side of things as well. So not just when mistakes have been made. Think about when we let our children have that degree of freedom, in their independence. Okay, you need to make your bed now. So they make their bed. What happens when it just still looks like a bit of a pig's ear? When the duvet is not straight and the pillow's not straight and the sheet's hanging out. It's easy for us to overcorrect and go and tuck it all in and make it perfect. What happens when we're doing that, when we're overcorrecting what our children do? They perhaps build up that impression that they're not good enough, that they need us to help them. And that goes against what we're trying to instill in them with their independence. So the idea is to let them try We're not striving for perfection at this point. We're striving for independence, for them to want to do things for themselves. So just be mindful when we are being over-corrective. So we've had a look at perhaps some aspects for our children there. And like I said right at the very beginning, with our different stages of development and our different personalities and our different environments, I haven't put any age ranges on this. For some people, the bits that we've spoken about so far might have been in our early years, maybe up to the age of 10 or 11. For some people, that's also applicable for our 12, 13, 14-year-olds. So like I said, for our own development, we have to go at our own pace. But we're going to move forward into things that we may associate with our young people, with our older, pre-teens and our teens. What do they need to develop independence? As our children grow into, adolescence, the demands placed upon them from us as parents and carers, from society as a whole, from the education system, from themselves, the demands placed upon them start to grow. So they need a lot more skills to be able to be resilient and independent. In essence, fundamentally what we need at this point is those supportive, strong relationships. Our children, young people, adolescents, teens, whichever terminology you'd like to put on this, we need to feel secure, don't we? When we feel safe, when we feel secure, we have the confidence to try new things, to stretch our comfort zone, to just step outside our comfort zone. When we feel secure and safe, we're more likely to become more independent. We're more likely to take steps to discover who we are, what we enjoy, what we like, what we want from the world. When we feel safe and secure, we're more resilient. We're more resilient to, friendships, breakdowns. We're more resilient to things not going to plan. We're more resilient to things that we hear in the news. So as a basis, our teenage years are really an important part for us. We need to feel secure during this time. Excuse me. Our teenage years are difficult anyway. If you think back to your own teenage years, lots of us might never want to go back to that sort of feeling, where we're trying to discover who we are, where we fit in, where do we belong. So building confidence during this stage builds up that can-do mentality. And our can-do mentality is just another way of saying independence, isn't it? As we move through our adolescent years, we're going to experience some huge emotions, whether they're big, joy, excitement, or whether they're big fear, worry. Those emotions that we're going to feel are going to be big. We can't get away from that. Our young people need to be able to regulate their emotional responses. And this is often really challenging for our children and young people with conditions such as ADHD and ASD. During our teenage years, our brains are under construction. If you think of in our lives, there's two major upheavals in our brains, big areas of construction. One is in our toddler years and one is in our teenage years. You might remember the kickback from our terrible twos and our toddlers. And we might appreciate that during our teenage years, there's lots of emotional response, lots of kickback. And that's because our brains like I said, under construction. We're developing the frontal lobe, which contains all of our logical, rational thoughts, our executive functioning. And during our teenage years, we're more likely to be operating within our emotional brain, which sits way back in our limbic system, where our fight or flight sits. So our children and young people, beg your pardon, our young people and our teens are likely to be in that emotional part of the brain quite often. If our teen can't regulate their emotion, they might not be able to navigate setbacks that inevitably come throughout our teenage years. So learning to recognize and understand our emotions is an important part of becoming independent. When we can recognize our emotions, we can articulate them. When we articulate them, we're less likely to see emotional behavior as a result. So encouraging our children and young people to talk about their emotions, talk about their feelings, can help arm them, if you like, with the resilience needed for the independence. To acknowledge those big emotions in our children is important. As parents and carers, when we're busy, it's easier for us to think, oh, they're just being dramatic. They're just having a moment. But for us to acknowledge that actually things are difficult for our young person at that time. They are having a tough time. That's how they're experiencing that event. By doing this, we're validating their emotion. If they feel validated, they're going to feel safe, they're going to feel secure, and all those things that we had on the previous slide. For our teenagers, it's important that they can develop all the skills needed to make good decisions. For some of us, we might recognise that due to conditions such as ADHD or such as ASD, our young people may have challenge around making good decisions. If we're impulsive, if we're susceptible to peer pressure, it can be really challenging to be able to make good decisions, good judgment calls. How do we learn how to make decisions? There's a question for you. How do we learn? Well, we need lots of input, don't we? We need help to develop and practice how to make good decisions. So, for decision-making skills, we need to know how to prioritize. Excuse me. We need to be able to consider facts, weigh things up. We need to be able to evaluate our options. So we've weighed up the facts. What are our possibilities? What could we do about that? We need to be able to anticipate outcome, cause and consequence. If we do it this way, what will be the consequence? If we do it another way, will that have a different consequence, a different outcome? So by working through how to make decisions, we're able to review, we're able to risk assess. And ultimately, we end up with a decision that we have a cause and a consequence. If we stay out late, we may get detention or a curfew. If we don't hand our homework in, we might have to stay in after school. If we don't get home on time, we might be grounded. So you're building up those skills to be able to make those healthy decisions. And at the core of this is communication. Talk to our children about how to make decisions, the elements that are involved in the process of decision making. For some of our children, they may appreciate, bullet points for when they're making big decisions, to be able to go through and make sure that actually they're happy with the decision that they make. the consequences of that decision. For everything we do, there's a consequence, isn't there? Whether it's a good consequence or whether it's a not so good consequence. By building up our ability to make good decisions, by building up our independence. Just as a sideline, being independent does not mean not being able to ask for help. And it's important for our children and young people to know that too. Yes, we might expect them to be independent and do things for themselves. But that open communication I've been talking about is really important. So we know we can talk things through. We can ask for help. We can ask for assistance. In being independent, that advice and that guidance is a firm part of those decision-making skills, isn't it? Thinking about our structure, our boundaries. Clear rules about what we expect from our children and young people are important in moving forward. So those clear rules might be about what we expect from their behaviour, how we expect them to communicate in our family setting, where our limits are, what's allowed, what's not allowed, what are the consequences of breaking those family rules, family agreements. Rules are important. Rules keep us safe. They give us different set of parameters, don't they? They let us try things. They let us, explore and grow. But we know where the safety lies. So if our rules and boundaries are consistent, we're allowed that personal growth. Excuse me. So, for us to be able to do that with our children, young people, give them parameters, let them explore within that, but then give them the consequences when those boundaries are crossed. Okay, so yes, you can go out at the weekend and you can go into town shopping. However, you need to be home at such a time, and you're allowed to use these forms of transport. Think about that type of scenario. We're giving our child the freedom, we're giving them the independence, but we're giving them parameters. Those parameters help our children feel safe. It's predictable and we know the consequences. When we're, some of the things we've been speaking about already are our independence, our decision making. For us to be able to make decisions, we need to know what our goals are. What do we intend? What do we need to do? So it's important for our team to be able to establish a goal, know what they're working towards, identifying what they want to achieve, and then discussing those steps on how to get there, in a similar vein to the way we were talking about that decision making. What do we need to do to make that happen? How do they track their progress, and how do they stay motivated? So those targets could be anything, couldn't it? It could be that homework that's due in at the end of the week. It could be that coursework that mightn't be due till a couple of weeks' time yet, but needs to be on our radar now. So we need to start making inroads into it now. It could be our goal setting might be to become independent enough to go to university for the next school academic year. What do we need to be aiming for that level of independence, independent living, washing our own socks, doing our own shopping? So goals are going to be very different for all of us. Encouraging our children and young people towards that goal setting encourages growth, encourages independence. When we're setting goals, we need to make sure that they're achievable. If they're not achievable, we're setting our children up for a fail. If they feel that they've failed, they're less likely to build that sense of independence and want to do more. For some of you who work in business, you may have heard of SMART goals. SMART is an acronym, S-M-A-R-T. And although it's a cheesy acronym, it's really good at honing in what we need to do to set goals. So think of the letters SMART. So any goal that we set needs to be specific. That's our S. We need to know what our target is. It needs to be measurable. So we need to know what steps we need within that. It needs to be achievable. Because if it's not achievable, why are we even setting that goal? It needs to be realistic. That's the R within SMART. Is it realistic for us to become fully independent by next week and not need any help from anybody else? Okay, that's not realistic, is it? So we need that boundary in terms of how we can meet that goal. What is realistic for what we're aiming for? And then the T is our timed or target. How do we know when we get there? So when we are setting goals, whether it's that homework goal or whether that's university goal, think in terms of that SMART goal. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. How do we know when we're there? Independence can look in lots of different ways. We've spoken about different types of independence, haven't we? We've talked about independence in leaving the house, whether that's social situations, going to school, going off to uni. But there's independence within the home as well, isn't there? Independence to be able to look after ourselves, to not be treated like a kid. How many of our children perhaps go, oh, I don't want to be treated like a little kid, I want to be treated like an adult. And our response is normally, well, you need to start acting like an adult. What we really mean there, I suppose, is how can we build your independence? Okay, so teaching our young person to take responsibility for different aspects of their well-being is important. And one aspect of their well-being is household, chores. It could be meal prep, it could be cleaning, it could be laundry, it could be the garden. So, for us to promote that independence, chores forms part of that. And whether our children like it or not, it's an important part in that independence, to be able to do things for yourself and not rely on other people. But a little bit like we were saying before, we've got to be mindful not to overcorrect. I remember when I was growing up and my parent would say, oh, you're doing it wrong, I don't do it like that. Okay, think about that term, I don't do it like that. We're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for them to do exactly the way we do it. We need them to learn for themselves and to develop their sense of, achievement, their sense of goal, their sense of task. So just be very careful about not overcorrecting. So, as I said, our children and young people, they are, going through their adolescence. They are moving towards adulthood. What happens when they live independently? Can they make themselves a meal? Can they work the Hoover? Can they wash their dishes? Can they plan to go shopping? So all of these different aspects are all part of being independent, aren't they? The thing about going shopping, what do we need? We need to know what shop we're going to, how we're going to get there. We need to know whether that shop is appropriate for everything we need, or do we need to go to a few different shops? We might take a shopping list with us, because what we buy in that shop will depend on what we need, what's already in our cupboards, what we need for our meals throughout the week. There's loads of elements to this, isn't there? And for our children, young people with MD, often the executive functioning that is needed for a task such as going shopping is significant. How can we help our children and young people break down these tasks so that they are manageable? Practice. Practice, practice, practice in a non-judgmental environment. It's really important to be building that independence. So let our children, young people, try. Let them be responsible for a chore. Even if it's not up to the same standard we do it, let them be responsible for it. Let them learn cause and consequence. If I cut corners, well, this is going to happen. If I don't sort the colours of my laundry, I might end up with pink socks when I didn't want pink socks. Allowing them the ability to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. If they don't, get their washing done, well, they're not going to have that clean shirt to go out at the weekend. If they don't perhaps do their shopping, well, they're not going to have the snacks that they want to have when they're going to the cinema at the weekend. Avoid the sting in the tail. So like it said, avoid overcorrecting. Avoid but why can't you do it like that all the time? And avoid the told you so. If you don't get your laundry done, you won't have those clothes to go out in the weekend. Told you so. That told you so, although, it comes to some of us as part and parcel, think about what that's doing to self-esteem. Think about what that's doing to confidence, all those things that we spoke about before. Our young people, as well as being responsible for, their bedrooms, their chores, growing up, friendships, all those things, budgeting comes in more and more the older we get. Remember what I said before about the increased demands on our executive functioning as we get older. And budgeting is one of those things. So teaching our young person basic money management skills and budgeting is a big part in them becoming independent. Think about some of the challenges we have there. Think about cash. Think about debit card. If our young person goes out with a pocket full of cash, are they more likely to blow that cash because it's there? Or are they more likely to go, oh, I've only got £20 and this has got to last me, so I'm not going to break into that £20 note, that's going to stay in my pocket. Think on the flip side. Think about our debit cards. If our money is in the bank and we've got a debit card, how does that work for our particular child or young person? Are they less likely to spend because it's on the debit card? Or are they more likely to spend because, money might be quite arbitrary if we can't see it and can't feel it and it's not tangible, we might spend more. Think about how that works with your child. If there's cash in their pocket, can they budget better? Or can they budget better when the cash is in the bank and they're only using it on specific things? This is all part of being independent, isn't it? We can have set allowances for our children, young people. Some of us might have allowances or pocket monies. By having that allowance or that set amount of pocket money can help our child budget what they have, anticipate what they need to spend their money on. So perhaps if we've got £30 in our pocket now, but we know we're going to the cinema at the weekend, having those parameters, having that budget. Okay, well, I'd like to go shopping later and I want to buy some perfume and I want to buy some snacks, but actually I've only got £30 and I want to go to the cinema. Think before what we were saying about that cause and consequence. If we spend all of our money now, what's the consequence? We're not going to be able to go to the cinema. And again, those with executive functioning challenges often need extra prompting around things like working memory, things like organisational skills. And that's where budgeting comes in, isn't it? Organisation. So having a set allowance can help anticipate our spends. We might have the ability to earn more money. Again, building on the independence. Okay, this is how much money I've got, but if I take the dog out all week this week, I'm going to earn a little bit of extra money. If I do babysitting at the weekend, I can earn some extra money. If I have that extra money, well, next week I can go to the cinema, but I can also go and have a burger with my friends during the week. So thinking about budget as, you know, an opportunity to use our decision-making skills, to use our risk assessment skills, to use our goal-setting skills. So like I've said, as we've gone through this presentation today, our children and young people with neurodevelopmental conditions such as ADHD or ASD have that added complexity, I suppose, and it might take us longer to reach independence than our peers. I've spoken about executive functioning throughout the presentation, haven't I? On screen here, we've just got an infographic that shows what those executive functioning challenges might look like. So perhaps reflect on what we've got on screen here with some of the elements that we've spoken about. And again, with our children, young people with executive functioning challenges, they will need extra prompts, extra structure, extra reminders to be able to meet these needs. Visuals are really, really good at doing that. I can't stress enough how important visuals are in helping our work and memory, in helping our organisational skills. So lots of opportunities for visual reminders for our children and young people will build that independence. For our kids who do experience executive function and delay, we may see that they may operate at an age that might seem less than their peers. We're not talking about intellect or intelligence, but our 10-year-olds might be functioning at around about the age of 7. It's important to consider this when we're thinking about independence and what we expect from our children. We might expect our 14-year-olds to be able to know their homework timetable, to know their school diary, to know when they need their PE kit or their cookery, ingredients. But in actual fact, if they're functioning at around about the age of 9, would we still expect that from them without any assistance, without any prompts or structure? Think about our 18-year-olds who might have that goal about going off to university come the new school year, where they need to live independently and shop for themselves and wash their own socks and still get their uni work done and maybe take on a part-time job. If they're functioning at around about the age of 12, they're going to need a lot more support to do that. So support and structure, reminders, open communication, and all those things that we've spoken about throughout the session. On top of that, we've had the challenge of having a global pandemic. And anecdotally, what we're hearing is in all children that there's a delay in their independence development. So if you think of our children who might have been in year 3 when the pandemic hit, our children in year 3, we start giving them a little bit more independence, don't we? What we expect from them. If you think of as they're coming to the end of primary school, maybe in year 6, we might perhaps let them walk home on their own. If our children have been, cooped away in a pandemic, our children may well not have learned those skills because it hasn't been, achievable or appropriate or even possible to do those skills. Think about, during the pandemic, our children couldn't play out. How has that impacted their independence? How do they know about curfews, about boundaries, about parameters? If our children didn't go to school during the pandemic. They may not have learned the skills to be able to walk home from school or get a bus home from school independently. So all of this might be shifted. So what we're seeing is the independence levels that we might have expected from our perhaps year 4 or 5s. They're not reaching that level of independence until perhaps year 6 or 7. Our children who were in year 6 or 7 when the pandemic hit, they might be year 9 or 10 or even 11 now. How has that impacted their sense of independence? So, when we're thinking about what we expect from our children, it might look very different to what we recognise from our levels of independence when we were children or young people. Because we certainly didn't have that pandemic to factor in. And we might not have had the neurodevelopmental condition also. So we can't draw those same examples. Well, I could cook a meal by the age of 10. Our children and young people now, with what they've, experienced with the pandemic and what they've experienced with their neurodiversity, might we have to adjust our own expectations? I hope that the presentation today has given you some food for thought, given you some opportunity to look at what we expect in terms of independence, some ideas on how we can increase our child or young person's independence. There's lots of resources available from ADHD Foundation's website, www.adhdfoundation.org.uk. Please go and have a visit, have an explore around our website. We also have social media pages on all the social media networks. Please do hunt us out, give us a follow, give us a share, explore what we have on offer. Thank you so much for listening to the presentation today. My name's Lisa Rudge. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.